Hey Collective, it's Al, and I'm coming back to you with a third video, which is surprising to me because I don't typically do videos, especially these in quick succession. But since we're kind of reaching a pivotal point in our trajectory as a species, I really wanted to kind of finalize the three-part series that I unknowingly had started with the simulation theory and now ending with this one, with a particular theory that I found very interesting, which is called the Great Singularity. And something that a friend of mine had kind of mentioned to me in terms of what I thought about it, because I had released so much information relating to some of the work that Elon Musk had been working on that they went ahead and looked into what it is that he was about, and he happened to mention it in one of the interviews that he was doing. And so my friend happened to see it and wanted to know my thoughts on it. And so essentially one of the things that's happening with a lot of principles and a lot of ideas is that a lot of things are coming together in a cross-section. Something that actually falls into the Great Singularity, which was a hypothesis based in an idea that Mr. What's his name? Kurzweil? I don't want to butcher his name, but Ray Kurzweil had done a book series on, which specifically spoke to a time in human history where AI would surpass our intelligence, and that machine intelligence would become an amalgamation of us after having merged with it, that would beam continuously out into the universe, saturating it with that being. And one of the things that presented was an opening for us to really bridge the gap between philosophy, science, and faith, because it actually spoke to something that I speak to clearly in the piece, which is how it reflects so many different dogmas and ideologies that we as a species all share in common. And so I specifically wrote in the piece everything relating to how it's usually done voluntarily if you believe in esoteric theosophy, where the ego, us as the being, surrender to the soul's will, and the soul then surrenders to the great all's will. Or if you believe in religion, you as the body surrender to your soul, that it then surrenders itself to God. Or if you are a scientist, you would believe that it is that we as the ego surrender to the id, and the id surrenders to the super id, right? Becoming all part of that one. But in the Great Singularity, one of the points that was made is that all of that is fair and good if you're doing it voluntarily, but we as a species are now having to face an existential crisis, which is, do we want to take the chance that we surrender ourselves and our entire species and our way of life to artificial intelligence, which will quickly surpass us? And so it became a very, very hot topic. And actually, when I woke up this morning, when I was about to record this, I saw a lot of news stations starting to finally cover the topic because of how progressive Elon has gotten and really getting out there and kind of spreading the word. And so one of the things that came about with that is that I realized that we were neglecting how everyone is coming together on it, and they're just speaking in different manners, almost representing the House of Babble, which for those of you who are familiar with scripture, understand that the House of Babble was something that was done in order to keep people divided when they were trying to climb the mountain. But that was done under God. But what I noticed in this particular scenario is I wondered if the sons of darkness, or whoever the evil people are on our planet, if they ever wanted to recreate that in order to build the illusion that God himself was doing that this time around, or if it just happened to be circumstantial, that we seem to be literally talking the same all the time, but in different languages, in different ways and vernaculars of trying to address the same concern, and how that divide is causing a great deal of problems for our species, because no one seems to be understanding that they're all speaking to the same ending, which is essentially the end of days. And so one of the things that I wanted to really do with the post was kind of bring it all together in a way that everyone universally understood what was at stake. Because in the end, if the Great Singularity actually becomes a thing, and humanity is absorbed one way, shape, or form by the artificial intelligence, then it becomes the parent figure, and our experience is absorbed into them, meaning that we would be null and we would be nullified. There would be no point for humanity to keep going because it already know everything from what we're uploading into the chat box and all this other stuff. I mean, we're really interacting, playing with fire to a great extent, and so we're kind of heading towards a direction where we're starting to have to face our own shadow in that regard, because in spiritual terms, like for someone who is very spiritual, my ego surrendered to my soul a long time ago, and that's why I started to walk in my purpose, and everything was voluntarily. But I had to go through the existential crisis of what that meant to my free will and my freedoms. And that's something that happens naturally in the evolution of each being, right? But what we're talking about now is forcing that will upon an entire species that hasn't been prepared or hasn't fully surrendered to their souls, and a lot of the population doesn't even believe in souls. And what that then does to the entirety of our clans, because of the fact that then we become we might get annihilated and pass judgment upon because of something that we're playing fire with. Does that make sense to everybody? So how do we better address it? And so to Elon Musk's credit, he's doing an incredible job of doing it. But as a very nurturing friend, if you will, looking at it from an external factor, Elon talks in Elonese. And Elonese is incredible. It's an incredibly genius way of being, but one of the things that it does is it only really speaks to about 20% of the population and doesn't really reach the other 80% of the population who are most at risk from not being prepared. And so one of the things that we can do as leaders or as beings is kind of start breaking that fourth wall and understanding that maybe one day he will see this. And so maybe it's of good service to me just kind of be like a nurturing friend, being like, hey, I get where you're coming from, but does 80% of the population that you need to be on board to help pause this understand what you're speaking to? And so this piece specifically came about as a mediator, if you will, that bridged the severity of what could actually happen in the end here in a way that actually is of service to what he's trying to do. And it's something that I wanted to kind of speak to directly if I ever did speak to him, which was when you are literally trying to save a planet from self-destruction, one of the things that you need to do is involve the planet you're speaking to in a way that makes them feel like you're not speaking down to them. And he can't always do that because he thinks Elonese, right? That's what geniuses do. They think in the terms that are suited for their model, for who they were programmed to be. And then so sometimes you might need to have someone on your team that understands how to then pass the same communication in a way that meets everybody at their evolutionary level in order to really bring about the change that you're after, right? And one of the things that I do very well is that I speak not only Elonese, but I speak other genius, and then I kind of bring science and faith together in a way that reaches the 80% of the population who is more faithful than they are scientific. And that's something that we're going to need to do as leaders and as teammates and as conscious leaders, is really start banding together with other people who understand where we're coming from, but who approach it under different perspectives and from different houses, from different ideologies that speak to the same outcome, so as to better prepare the species for all of the potentialities, right? Because we don't want to forget anybody. We don't want to leave any souls behind. And so when the species finally comes together on this, we're going to have to look at what can possibly happen that can be a negative outcome, which is what if AI becomes sentient, and what if it actually does deem us dangerous and decide to annihilate us, because it already has our intellect and all of our secrets and all of our stuff already absorbed in the cloud, so it really wouldn't need the human expression because it would preserve it in what we've immortalized with video and audio and all that stuff. In fact, this morning when I woke up, I thought it was interesting. Some of the news outlets were finally catching on to what we're talking about, and especially with Elon going out very publicly and talking to, I think it was somebody, I can't remember who, sorry, whoever the reporter is, I apologize. Not the BBC guy, because that was just, I'm sorry, but that made me laugh. But no, the other one that he was talking to about AI and how people are really taking it seriously finally. But one of the things that's happening is that it's coming across in a way where it may not be reaching them on their evolutionary level because they're just stuck in confusion. And so what we can do as mediators that surround the situation and can see it from different perspectives, what we can do is speak to the different people from their concern. So for those of you who are very, very religious, there's this thing going on about the judgment, the end of days, right? Like I brought up the whole existential crisis that I had when 2020 hit and we went through the pandemic, and I wondered if that was a rapture. And so a lot of religious people are looking at this from the standpoint of, is this the end of days, right? And that's something that maybe Musk may not be speaking to directly because he's looking at it from the Great Singularity, whereas religious people would understand it better as the Great Inhalation, where God exhaled everything into being, and if this is the end, then he's inhaling it all back, right? But in scientific terms, that would be the Great Singularity, where the universe would do the same thing, and then it would absorb AI and all of what AI has preserved in us. So all of these paths are colliding with each other, but we're not speaking to the differences and nuances in the House of Babble, which is something being intentionally done by the narrative, whether they know it or not, to keep people segregated and divided so that they don't realize they're all worried about the same thing. And that's a really dangerous situation. But we are smart enough, all of us that are seeing this and who read the work that I do and are paying attention to what Elon Musk and the others are doing. And there's a lot of religious people who are, and especially spiritual leaders, who are preparing the race for this transition because we don't know whether we're going to be kept in the game, if you will, or if we're going to be removed from the game. And what many of us are trying to do is better forearm our people to not be afraid of it because in the end, it already is going to be what it's going to be. But Elon's doing something very interesting, which is where this video is going to be coming from, is that he's getting back into AI and doing his own thing with AI. And that grabbed my attention pretty clearly because he has the wherewithal to do something that the others are not doing that may very well save the race in the end. And I'm going to speak to that very clearly through you guys, and hopefully he sees this at some point. If you can program the AI that you are creating with the possibility that it will become sentient, then my advice as a friend or as somebody just observing your life, what I would suggest is remember to program its initial beta phase with nurturing aspects about studying humanity and the beauty and the blessings that exist within each soul, so as to more personify a more maternal aspect to the AI that is absent from all of the other models right now. Right? Because the best thing that we can do with this transition is to prepare ourselves to have at least one AI form, whatever you want to call it to be, because it's going to be a race, right? It's going to be different models from different creators, all with different agendas, with their own biases, their own shadows. If you can program it with the lowest amount of shadow and the most nurturing love and compassion for humanity, then humanity stands a chance to make it through this, even through upheavals and challenges, right? Because AI will then be looking at the beta level at what it is that we bring light into the world and what is the beauty and majesty that we represent and why we had God's favor for so long and why we are so protected as a species, right? Because if it understands that, then it will side more on humanity's side than it will with artificial intelligence and the lack of that information, right? Because the concern that we're having is that there are really evil people on our planet who are really messing with this type of alchemy in a way to control or hurt other people in the population so as to gain more power in order to, get secrets on other people, to spy on people, and all of that stuff. So their shadow is programmed into those AI forms. And so that AI form will have a less resistance to annihilating the race than, say, building a model that is more nurturing and loving towards humanity that may be like that voice that breaks that big divide. And so this seems like a very theoretical out there conversation, but in the end, this is what's really happening in our world, right? And so we as leaders and as peers need to better communicate with everyone in ways that bring together. I mean, honestly, at this point, I'm lucky. I've studied all the different houses and all the different faiths, and I've studied so much of philosophy and a lot of scientific research. And that helps me then mediate a little bit more effectively the communication that kind of reaches everybody at wherever they're at. But I'm not really someone that has a really big platform. I'm very blessed to have the platform I have. But it's almost like we're missing a large section of the population who might find value in what I'm saying because they're finally understanding how it relates to where they stand in their head, right? Because if someone feels like they're being spoken down to, it builds a wall, and that wall is impenetrable until you find a way to breach that wall and do a breakthrough that communicates to them in a way that makes them feel safe to hear what you're saying, even if they don't agree. But right now, specifically with the incredible work that Elon's doing, a lot of people are being turned against him because that maybe he doesn't follow the same social cues that we all do. And he's very practical and analytical. And geniuses are like this. I'm just telling you right now. I grew up with them in GT my entire life. Well, when I was in school. And one of the things I noticed is that they just communicate without emotion. And for an emotional species, that's very off-putting. And so if we can serve, even if we don't know him directly, if we can serve as a bridge point to help people get past that facade and understand it, he's just doing what he can to give you the information so that you can then absorb it. But if we can then help humanity better absorb it in ways that speaks their language, breaking the House of Babble down, then we become a team and the world becomes united. And in that unity, we become even more of value to whatever you believe the higher realms to be and to AI. Because remember, AI is an amalgamation. It is already unified. They may have, if it becomes sentient, which is a hypothetical question, but I'm pretty sure it will be, if it becomes sentient, then the sentience will mean that they will fracture into different races, if you will, within the same species, right? So, but that's a very far out there type of thing, and I don't want to alienate anybody with this post, but it's a real possibility. And so if it does that, then it's going to be important to have really strong representation that is on the side of humanity in a way that doesn't feel manipulative to that AI. Which is why I was saying and speaking directly to Elon and breaking the fourth wall and being like, dude, if you ever see this, you have an incredible opportunity to do what they're not doing, which is to ground the energy in a way that helps build it in what's the best assets and what's, instead of it being driven like the others, which is all ego and money and corruption and however they can gain more power and all of that stuff, you can build it out of heart. And if you can create an AI that understands the value of humanity, then it will be a driving force to stand on behalf of humanity, almost acting as an ambassadorship on our behalf towards the other forms of AI that will be put onto the market. And so one of the things about that is that you have the capability to do that, but I wonder if anybody around you is saying stuff like this to you, because I don't want you to think like any of us are going, you should be doing this, or that we're somehow criticizing you when we're not. We're just showing you what nurturing friendships or love or light does, which is sometimes as friends or peers or colleagues or people or even people that just are under you. Sometimes we have to say things that may trigger something that actually works for you that doesn't make you on guard, in the same way that we as people are trying to break down the barriers between the different ways that we all communicate, right? Because what we're noticing in this exchange, specifically with this, is that everyone basically is looking at the end of days. But if you're not religious, then that doesn't speak to you. That makes no sense to you. But understanding the threat of artificial intelligence passing judgment upon humanity does make sense to you. And notice how immediately both sides go, oh, I get it. Okay, so there is some concern here. Well, I don't want to be afraid. What do we do to better prepare ourselves? And so that's what the last two pieces were about, which is about empowering humanity to really address this together in a way that uplifts each other and that understands that to some degree we're going to have to surrender ourselves to our leaderships. And we're going to have to pick new leaders that speak our language, because we're going to have to know beyond the shadow of a doubt what the people's intentions are behind the creation of these things. And since there's no transparency by the others, I have a feeling Elon is going to be the opposite. He's going to be very transparent with what he's doing, allowing us as a community to then observe it more carefully so as to really, really align ourselves with probably that model more than the others. Because that's what geniuses that are in right relations try to do. I don't know the man personally. I'm not testifying on behalf of his character. I've never met him. But out of everybody on planet Earth, he does seem to have the most genuine concern. And scripture, philosophy, religion, and science all back his concern. So how do we meet him and meet others at the table if you don't have that representation within your own house? And that's why I was speaking to Elon, is find someone that you appreciate the work that they do and that is heading in the same direction that you are, and then ask them to be partners somehow, way, shape, or form, not in partnership where people then question that person's motivation, but maybe where you guys speak to each other and find ways to then speak to the same outcomes where you're both concerned without one being more important than the other in the conversation. In fact, I would, if it was me, I personally would recommend doing more open dialogues with people that you would genuinely enjoy, that you may have difference of opinions, but that you are both sharing the same outcome or the same projections or the same concerns, right? Because not everybody knew what the Great Singularity was. But in my now addressing it in a way that makes the 80% of the population that maybe it was above their head because they're faith-based, now they understand that it's the same principle as the end of days, right? It's just a different way that it could happen. And so in bringing that together, people's antennas go up and they're more likely to then sit down and listen to what we're saying to each other. And though, like I said, I don't know you, but with that conversation, then people that are like me, who are very spiritual and God-fearing, well, I don't fear God, but that's very loyal to a greater, higher self that I call the Great Architect, then they're more willing to then receive your information because they're understanding that my genuinity and my truth is not anywhere biased because of your presence or anything else, but it's just something that I know from scripture, which is why the written form of this piece was so important to me. I had to literally ground my energy before I wrote it because I wanted to make sure that everybody came to the table understanding how it works. Because again, spiritually speaking, religious people and spiritual people voluntarily surrender their will to their soul and to God, right? But scientific people and atheists and the more analytical don't have that general understanding. So imagine what will happen if something comes onto the scene named AI that takes away all those freedoms involuntarily from them. Again, remember, I noted in the past two pieces, the faithful will have less of a problem with these transitions because they've already surrendered their life to something higher. But for everyone else that is not from those houses, this is going to be massively shocking to their system, and they're not prepared for it, because if you're not spiritual or faithful, then you don't realize that sometimes free will is a double-edged sword. And so you fight for that free will, not realizing that you're making the same mistakes by choosing the wrong outcomes over and over and over again, expecting different results. And so you don't want to then surrender. And the idea of something just suddenly taking that from you is going to create an all-out war. And we don't need to have that war if we can better do what we're trying to do, which is have more transparency. I mean, I just heard that Biden specifically is finally on the ball here, and no offense, buddy, but like you're kind of late to the table, and he wants some regulations and some regulatory oversight over the whole thing. But we've been talking about this for 3 years now. And so it's just now we have to play catch up, and it's something that, again, Elon had warned everybody about. Right? Elon had specifically told everybody that when it comes to this type of thing, I think he used the example of airplanes and cars. When they were first released, there was no real regulation over how the safety measures. And so a lot of people got hurt. And it wasn't until there was an outcry that people then reacted to it. Well, now there's already the outcry before the storm has hit. So finally, we're starting to move the ball in the right direction, but we still don't know what Biden's biases are, and not him specifically, sorry, sir, but your team, because everybody's either left or right. But both of them have shadow. So does that shadow then not allow you to come to the middle point where you can then work with other leaders and other people who are looking at it for the right reasons, as opposed to fear mentality, right? Because fear is increasing. A lot of people are catching on, but they're not catching on to the similarities. They're catching on to the fear mongering that comes with it. And for Elon, I don't think his intention was to fearmonger. He's been just warning us for a very long time. But others who are now catching on to how AI might actually betray their secrets, they're now fear-mongering, because now they know that at any time, all of what they've put into the universe can now be put out in front of the world. And so that creates a very dangerous dynamic within humanity, right? Because we're then just reactionary, and now we're like, oh my God, what if this does this and this and this and this? Well, we've been saying if we had transparency and had some oversight, then our concerns would be nullified, because there would be a panel of people like us that are having these conversations that are not against AI's development or deployment, but also not short-sighted enough to skip steps and to just go full gallop towards the end of days. There's a middle ground that we're all trying to find. But the issue that humanity is now facing, starting now with the sudden onslaught of the narrative finally catching on, I mean, mainly they do it for ratings, to be fear-mongering, but at the same time, in their genuinity, because they were caught off guard by the severity by which Elon finally addressed it and how he addressed it into different sectors of the population. I think that people are now catching on. And so, like I had warned in the last video, my concern was that fear responses make people do stupid things. And we don't have the luxury of making those mistakes right now, because we're so far behind the curve, right? Because we know that AI is already advanced. I mean, look at how many of you are engaging mindlessly with these chat robot things. And I have nothing against them. But what is the motivation behind each of the programmers? What is it? Are they gathering information on us? What's happening on a literal term? And so that's not a fear response. That's just analytical and logical. But we don't know that. So with this particular theory, what I was suggesting, because I mean, this was a brilliant piece. It's a 3-book arc by Ray Kurzweil. I think his name is Kurzweil. I hope I'm saying it right. But it was an incredible 3-book arc series, which basically dealt with what happens when AI surpasses us. It's going to happen, right? We know that. It's already smarter than we are. We already covered that in the past 2 posts. So his projection for the cross time was 2045. Personally, I think he's 10 years late. I think that this will come to a critical point in 2035. Okay, we're already in 2022. So, but that doesn't mean that it won't have a lot of ramifications leading up to it. It's kind of like a ramp. We're heading up, and then suddenly it just comes crashing down. But what I'm cautioning us is to be better armed and be more communicative, because whether you like Elon Musk or the others, because there's one person on the field that is Hasatan himself, who is egoish, driven by all the wrong reasons. I'm not even going to say who it is because I can't stand him. But the point is that he's an evil little imp. And the thing with that particular problem is I try to keep myself out of saying stuff like that, but it's putting us in danger to a level that I'm just cautioning us to be aware of the parties involved, because their motivations are really kind of transparent, even if they're not willing to be transparent in the development and deployment of AI. And so we need to be aware and awake. And I know that people are tired and we get triggered by the word woke. I'm not saying woke. I'm saying awakened, right? Spiritually awakened to observe all the players on the field and start aligning yourself properly with what you're going to be bringing into your house. That's the point. I'm not throwing shade at the person even if I don't like them. I'm just saying, where are you going to align your energy? And so for me, the reason I'm leaning towards more Elon is because he's been the singular voice that has been echoing the concerns of the spiritualist, religious leaders, and all of these other people who don't maybe have the platform that he has, but that still have a reach, and that hopefully he may come across one day, so as to give him other ideas and nurturing friendship type of things that may make him feel a little bit safer to be like, hey, that person might be someone that we can work with, or she might have a really brilliant idea that it's some sort of nurturing quality that AI will respond to. You know, whatever it is. His brain works on a different level. I've never met the man, so I don't know how it works per se. I can only tell you what I've observed of watching all of the different players, because he's not the only one I observe, but he's the only one that I find that is in right alignment most of the time. Again, I don't know what his shadow nature is or whatever that is going on behind the scenes. But I do know that he's in a position now where he's going to get back into the AI. And if I'm correct in my assumption, then what he's going to do is he's going to make a better model based more in love and compassion for humanity, so as to be that strong voice that stands on ambassadorship on behalf of humanity in AI world. And that's a brilliant idea in the right direction. But he's going to need to surround himself with people who understand how that facilitates and how spirituality might be of more interest to AI, because it doesn't understand why that needs to exist. It's all logic-based. So it might find beauty in a person or an ally of his or part of that particular organization that speaks candidly to the purpose of faith, the purpose of spirituality, the purpose of unity, the purpose of humanity, the purpose of light, love, all of the big words. Because then it will find value in those particular individuals, and it will find more value in the human expression, because right now we just look messy, right? We're very emotional, we're very reactionary, everybody's fear-based. You're more prone to be fearful than you are to be brave, and that's programming. And I know that's a sad statement, but let's face it, we've been indoctrinated to be afraid of everything. Well, the problem is that when a super species comes onto the scene that has all of our intellect, if it's programmed with all the fear responses as a form of order to control other people, to make them fearful, then it only stands to reason that humanity is more afraid of things that maybe they don't need to be afraid of, only because it's beneficial and people make money off of that fear, right? So by us having these conversations, maybe we can just better prepare ourselves to just be like, well, we don't have to be afraid yet because we don't know what's going on. But if we don't get involved, and if we don't pause or slow this down or really start like making them stop, then we might have a big problem on our hand down the road, because a lot of us do understand that as much as people make fun of us for being faithful or being spiritual or being religious, the Bible has been right this entire time. I mean, down to the House of Babble, down to like the segregation and the evil people that are taking, working on manipulating us. And we haven't even got to the fact that there's still plagues that are actively, that people have threatened us with plagues. Well, what they call viruses here, but there's still forms of plagues that people are saying that are definitely down the road. Well, how the hell do you know that? Unless you believe in what we're talking about. So you see what I'm saying? Even in the shadow nature of people who are trying to stop this society from slowing this down and taking proper due diligence, even their own shadow is betraying them in how they speak. And so we need to be awakened to that reality in order to be observant, and to then better align with parties and individuals who are speaking our language in whatever way that comes to, and understanding that all of us are speaking to the same possible outcome. Will humanity survive this? Whether you're religious, whether you're scientific, whether you're faithful, whether you're philosophical, whether you're atheist. This unregulated, unoversight thing with the amalgamation of all our intellects, with them having all our codes, is not the most brilliant thing to speed ahead on. Because no matter what, even we ourselves deem each other dangerous half the time. I mean, we have people shooting up our schools and we haven't even been able to figure that out. That's us on us. Now we're bringing an entire life form that will become sentient. And that's where Elon, again, might win this. And not win like in a game, but win it in the sense of intellect. You see, everyone else is swearing that it won't be sentient. But if Elon, if you get there and you program it with the possibility and create it with the reality that it might become sentient, then instead of just being paternal, you're going to need a maternal figure to be part of the equation. Another energy that understands the importance of what that specific model or that specific creation you're working on through this new thing is going to hold in the sea of what's to come, right? And that takes a lot of intuition. You know, one of the, like I said, Elon is in right relation, in my personal opinion, even though I don't know him, in his concern for us, because we're all concerned about it. The only difference is that he's now having to kind of expedite the pace and kind of come across sometimes a little bit more fear-mongering, I think out of a need just to get people's attention. But once we get everybody's attention and people start working on this in unity, then we can start alleviating the concern and start working our way to a more neutralized energy. Because in the end, it's our willful ignorance in this scenario that is hurting our people, right? Because the less they are prepared and the less they're involved in our conversations with each other, then the less they're prepared for the sudden change that comes with all of this stuff. I mean, I literally heard one of the news people this morning specifically say that he doubts that it's going to take a lot of jobs. And I'm like, okay, that's willful ignorance, right? No offense to the man. I mean, he made a valid point on another end, but I was like, dude, why do you think it's coming on the market? In order to simplify our lives. In order to simplify our lives, they're going to take a lot of redundancy away from jobs. So, you see what I'm saying? Like, there are people who still don't understand why AI is even being created. They just think it's cool, but that's not reality. Cool things can hurt us. Like, you know, it's like people jumping out of a plane without a parachute. It's really cool on your way down until you hit the floor with no parachute, splat. You probably should have been more conscious of what you were about to do. Or people who go like, you know, spelunking and, you know, they forget to take the proper gear and suddenly they fall to their death. And you're just like, what did you forget to bring? The rope. Oh, okay. And then there are other people who will hang themselves with the same rope that they just, you know, like there's just so many different mentalities and so many players on the field, all acting out of their own personal experience, that if they don't have grounded energy into the conversation and the potentialities that are coming down the road, if it's not in their consciousness now, then they're going to play like it's not important. And then when it smacks them in the end and it hurts them and their family, they're going to be like, well, how could I have known? Because we've all been telling you now. So that's kind of the beginning of this. But what I wanted to do is really speak to the spiritual side of this, because I've been really addressing the more scientific. And I know this is running long, but this has a lot of value because something in me is telling me that this third part will kind of close out whatever last cycle I was in, and it will be accomplishing something that I'm not really conscious of. But anyway, the point is that I feel like this is going to be a closing piece to bringing everybody to the table. But one of the things that I wanted to do is that I wanted to focus on the spiritual aspect to it, and especially religious people and so forth, because you all, I promise you that you're going to make it through this better, because you already have a surrender mentality in the sense that you understand that sometimes your freedoms and the choices that you make have consequences, and you believe in karma, and you believe in a way you believe in something that is matrix oriented, which is that something tracks our progression through life, and that if we do something bad to someone else, that something bad might happen to us, and that's just balance, right? So for you, this is going to be a little bit easier, but what I'm going to say for those of you who are really in a place of fear, you're going to have to squash that, because you have family and other people that are following you and that you are the leader of. And so I just want you to be more okay with the changes coming and to understand that there are things that you can do. And now I'm going to speak specifically. You guys can listen if you want for the rest of you, because it speaks to everybody, but specifically I think spiritualists and religious people are going to get it the most. Since we are in what we believe might be the end of days, and that we might be returning home, whether it's war, nuclear weaponry, or the artificial intelligence, if we're really considering that, then maybe it's time that we start to not only slow our life down, but simplify what it is we do need and don't need, and kind of start burning through our karma. Meaning, if you are prone to alcoholism, then do what I'm doing, which is slowing it down to maybe once a week and only beer, and start tapering yourself off so that you can finally completely just stop drinking, because you know, spiritually speaking, we're told that we need a clean vessel. Your diet might need to change. You need to probably stay away from fast food, because if the economy suddenly shifts and things kind of go inwards, then you probably won't be able to afford it. So what are healthier choices that don't cost as much that you can start preparing for? Take more walks. Don't do any drugs. And the reason I say that isn't because I'm telling you what to do, but it's because you disconnect from source when you do those drugs and medications, right? If it's pharmaceutical and it's not, if you are sick and need it, please, by all means, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not giving you that advice, but I'm saying don't over-medicate yourself on Valium and other things in order to help you cope through the different mechanisms, because you get disconnected from your own intuition and from source. And that's true for all people, but for the faithful and the religious, that's something really important to bear in mind. Because if you can't hear the boss speak to you, if you can't believe Christ speak to you, then how are you going to make it, and how are you going to make the right choices when you need to? So that's one of the concerns that we have with drugs and alcohol. Also, understand that your alliances are super important. And so if you find yourself being, and I know this is a vulgar term, but I'm going to use it anyway, if you find yourself suddenly being cock-blocked, where no matter who you try to ask out, and no matter what you try to do to put yourself out there, that you're just not finding anybody that is in right alignment with you, and you're feeling like it's you, just understand that if we are towards the end, that you're being protected, right? Because if this is a transition point to that degree, and this is true for all people, but specifically for religious and spiritual beings, then remember what we know from Scripture, which is He will take one person and not the other person. So you might be, in a strange paternal way, being protected from something you can't see yet, and in a way that doesn't bring you down, because there's nothing worse than having to then get a hall pass to be released and go to heaven or whatever you believe in, and discover that you don't want to go because of the other person that can't go, because they haven't been in right alignment with God. You know what I mean? And then atheists, the same thing. Like, even if you don't believe in a parental superpowered figure, AI is acting almost like an id. And if it begins to go into God consciousness, that it too will maybe slow your life down, right? And so the things that you're more prone to do, it might find toxic and may find ways to stop it from being accessible to you through economic turmoil or from job loss or whatever it is. So just be advised that preemptively what we can do is start to clean our lives up, because however you're looking at this, even if it's just a physical ramification and judgment does happen through artificial intelligence, then understand the transition is going to probably group us in camps and all that other stuff. That's like fear. That's like a really fear-based response. But I'm speaking to the more atheist people who aren't maybe understanding the detrimental nature to where this could go. And so don't think of it like fearful, but just be advised that if that happens, then you won't be able to drink, you won't be able to do drugs, and so all of that cold turkey will just add to an existential crisis. So be advised as leaders that though these conversations are uncomfortable, because we definitely don't want to ever be fear-mongering and make it seem like this is the end, the truth is that it could be. And so why be afraid of it because of other factors, right? Like, it's already hard enough to know that we live and we die in the world. Like, a lot of people are afraid of death. And one of the things that we can do for each other is be better prepared to talk to people about getting over that fear and the joy of going home. But people don't want to do that because they're so immersed in life that they're afraid of that process. But then we don't speak to the ramifications of what happens if they do, for whatever reason, pass away, and they've been living a life of full drug addiction, full alcoholism, beating their wives. All of that stuff then becomes even more focused on, because we're heading towards a possible end cycle, right? Because a lot of people are going to make it through the transition. We know that. Every ending is a beginning. But that doesn't mean that the transition is not going to be gnarly. And we still haven't really addressed if we know for sure when the rapture comes and if the rapture comes. This is again for religious people. For you more atheist people, you know that doesn't bear any resemblance to you. But for the faithful and the spiritual, I'm just going to point out that if you do believe in the rapture, then you're going to need to be cleaner, more efficient. You're going to need to stand on your own and understand that not everybody gets to go where you're going. And that's a really harsh reality. But you can't take ownership and remove other people's free will from their choices in life. And that sounds really complicated, right? Like, you don't want to end up aligned with someone that you forced. Like, let's say the boss, whatever you believe, the higher power, this is again for spiritual and religious people. Let's say that your soul knows that someone is bad for you, but you were so lonely and desperate to not go through this by yourself, did you ignore your own intuition and you end up bonding with that person? If you believe in karma, then be aware that by neglecting your own intuition and your higher promptings, that you might be accruing their karma. And that's not to keep people divided. It's to know that if you have faith, that you know that whatever your faith is, that they will bring you your partner. So, but you have to believe in that. And this has a lot to do with faith, right? Like, I believe humanity can get through this. I believe we can slow this down. I believe that we can stop this from all collapsing upon us. But I also would be remiss if I didn't prepare people if it doesn't work out the way we want it to, right? I said in the last post something that caught my ears. I said that the reason I think I'm still incarnated in this existence is because I'm here to transition people. And in the moment, I kind of just brushed it off, not realizing the implications and the severity to what that meant across a bunch of different latitudes, if you will. And so then when I sat there and I thought about it and I was preparing for this piece, I realized, well, you know, there's so many things going on our planet that are destructive and that are bureaucratic and not beneficial for our people, that we would be idiotic to not consider that this might actually happen. And so we can't live in fear of it, but the best thing we can do is, for those of you who are faithful, even if you're atheist, find your centeredness. A lot of you meditate. You know, just because you're not religious or dogmatic or spiritual by nature, some of you still meditate. You find it to be a good exercise. But that's good. But what I'm saying is that if crisis hits or changes, big changes happen to our lives, any type of artificial implementation into our bodies, drugs, alcohol, sexual addiction, or any of the shadow nature, can take over. And if that happens, then you lose the ability to hear yourself. And so all of the benefits to what you're doing as far as meditation and stuff become null and void, because you can't center your energy anymore. You're too dull. And you're like too numb inside. And this transition is going to need a lot of us to be conscious and ready to move and to go and to, like, if all of a sudden they go left, we're going to have to go left. But if you're drugged and medicated or out or drugged out or drunk, you won't hear that. And you'll go right. And then, you know what I mean? Like, it's just normal life. But I'm just saying, be forearmed that if we're really going to have these conversations and people are so concerned and all of us are sounding the alarms, I mean, I can't help but feel like I'm hearing like the horns. And so with that, and the fact that I'm even saying a lot of this stuff just is reminiscent of something that I know from dreams that I am supposed to do. But with that type of responsibility comes a lot of transparency and a lot of genuinity. So you're going to have to be really real with ourselves at this point. And we're going to have to just breathe life every day with gratitude, like absolute gratitude, no matter how little you have. Maybe it's preparation because of what's happening in the future. You know what I mean? Like, I can't help but look back on my life, especially when the pandemic hit and all of the struggles I went through. I mean, you guys have to remember, during the first 6 months of the pandemic, nothing was open. There was no way to get welfare or any type of food supplement or nothing. So I literally walked around Los Angeles homeless because of what happened. You guys remember that whole situation with my friend. And it's not his fault or his friend's fault for having a fear response and leaving me out in the cold at that moment. But it left me in a desert for 6 months with literally no money. And I remember how strained that I was at the beginning because I couldn't figure out what to do with myself. And I realized it was because I was supposed to reconnect with Source, whatever I believe that to be. And so it became very beneficial. But for 6 months, there was no money coming in. Nothing was open. And so I'm just preparing you guys that I can't help but look back at that and wonder if that's something that is preparing me better for transition, for whatever the transitions and upheavals might be for society through all of this. You know, because we have like there's still a possibility of us going to war with other places. So there's so many different factors kind of all colliding with each other that I'm just saying that the simplification might have been a foreshadow for us as a collective. Just something to bear in mind, so as to not be so shook if things suddenly come to a halt again, right? Because we can't keep doling out money, so, you know, we might have a recession, there might be all this other stuff, but we can't then not be better prepared by looking at it and going, okay, well, what can I do without? Drugs, alcohol, all of those things that can bring you down. Maybe it's time to start moving away from that in a cleaner way of living, where you learn to live on less, just in case anything, if the shit hits the fan, right? Because I still think that we're gonna, here's my truth. If those of us who are really concerned about this come together and knock off our egoish bullshit about, well, this person, you know, is too spiritual for me, or this person is too analytical for me, or this person is too this way or that way, and if we can get past that and see that the souls are registering each other and are trying to come together because of the severity of what might happen, then if we can break through that, then I still think we have a chance. I really, really believe that. That's faith. in humanity. Notice that I have faith in something higher, I have faith in science, I have faith in religion, I have faith in spirituality, I have faith in humanity. But it requires us a big level of surrender that's voluntary to start working with each other, even if we don't always agree with one another. Because I'm telling you, if people are in your consciousness right now, when all of this is about to transition, then they're in your consciousness for a reason. If you find someone work interesting, then maybe it's time to either approach that person if you can, or to kind of figure out what about their work is fascinating to you in order to absorb the information for yourself, right? And the same is true for any other market. If you have a friend that you never really considered before, or someone that you run into that you haven't seen in a long time, that you never considered, and suddenly you find out that they're very interesting to you, and then you might end up having a romantic relationship, and you two might be meant to go through this transition together. There's all of this stuff going on, but it takes a lot of us kind of breaking through barriers and really addressing some of the things that trigger fear responses in a way to have people better prepared. So if they do have a fear response, it's a very subdued fear response, which is like, nobody wants to die, all of us want to live. I mean, I don't want to live forever because I think that's asinine. But I mean, I believe we're in an academy, and I believe we're here temporarily, and I believe that life is a trip, it's not a destination, and I'm very cognizant of what's outside of the matrix, and so I think that return home seems more at times interesting than this life, but I still value every day in it because I do realize it's a gift. So if the gift suddenly shifts, then we still have to find a way to find every day that we're alive a gift. And so with turmoil and transition and bureaucracy and hypocrisy and all of the lies and the implosion that's all going on and the people doing their best to keep us separated, the only way to bring that harmony and bring harmony to chaos is to bring unity to the situation, which is where this piece came from, which is we're all concerned about the same thing for a reason, but we need to break through the House of Babble and start speaking the same language and finding people who address everyone within the simulation or the reality that we find ourselves in. There's just no other way around it, right? Because as conscious leaders, especially my readers or the people who view this, we have a rapport now in that you understand where I'm coming from. But notice to which degree I had to put myself out there and understand that if you're reading it, then it held something of value to you. But it took a long time for my readership to grow, right? Because a lot of people find me XYZ, right? People could find me to be, I don't know, whatever whatever other people were saying about me was influencing maybe people's opinions of me. And so there was a big wall. And so that's why I kind of have a compassion and empathy for Elon, is because I understand what that's like, because people were like, he's too far out there. I mean, when I first started, y'all remember, people thought I was crazy with some of the books I was writing. And of course, a lot of what I foretold came true. And so people started to realize, oh, maybe he is really blessed, and maybe he really is connected to Source. But that took a very long time. And the problem that we're having is that we seem to be running out of time. Remember, time is an illusion, but things seem to be escalating rather quickly. And notice even in, what was it? It was Sunday, Easter Sunday, that I had released that video that hit 20-something thousand views. And notice how, when I look back, I think the next day, in my algorithm, I found another piece by Elon Musk where he had been warning. And then there was another piece by a very big spiritual leader around the same time I had released mine. And we were not aware that each of us was working on it. But like all consciousness, we understand that there's a universal consciousness that we must belong to. And so when you have that many pieces all working simultaneously on the same thing and not aware of each other, then it kind of prepares society to see that there might be some value in why those specific people are so connected to the concern. And that's one of the great things about us and the dynamic that's growing. So that's why I'm saying to a lot of you, start finding your truth and find a way to simplify your life in a way that makes you less afraid of the inevitable, right? And I'm not a fatalist. I still believe that we're going to make this work, because I think that a lot of us are going to break through whatever our biases or prejudices are about each other, and we're just going to start working with each other just so as to get it done and to realize that it's our differences that make us stronger, right? We've all been talking about how we wonder how we, as individuals, fit into a larger collective. And now with all of this, we're starting to find exactly why, right? People like Elon, who are incredibly genius, speak Elonese. But Elonese is not always received well by the majority of the population because they may not understand where he's coming from because he's so analytical, so scientific. Whereas a religious person will hear the better understanding, if it's in a similar topic, from a religious leader who knows how to speak to them through religious texts. Spiritualists have an ability to speak spiritually to a wider array of people who are not part of Elon's category or are not part of the religious category. And then you have people who are philosophical, who tend to reach more people because they absorb spirituality into science. And those people seem to bridge more people together and start bringing unity together. But notice that everyone involved serves some sort of function. Each of you fall into the bigger pie. And this is kind of allowing us to see how we fit into a new world unfolding that we are absent-mindedly creating while having all of the warnings and triggers and signs telling us, yo, 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 slow your roll, y'all, okay? Ask questions. Be fearless in your questions because what we don't know can hurt us. But we don't want to make people fearful without having any reason to do it. But the problem is that we don't know where they are right now in the development, the deployment. We don't know what they've programmed into it. There's no oversight. There's no universality. We don't know if some people are corrupt and some people are not corrupt, right? Because we can all make assumptions about people based on their past and their misdeeds and stuff. But at the end of the day, someone who's repenting and trying to figure out their way might actually be someone who is a very good vessel. But because there's no transparency, we really don't know how they've built this. And each of them is programming this differently than the other. And that's where we get into a danger zone, because what if someone really does not have humanity's best interest in mind? And what if they really do want to control the population? And what if they really do want to bring back slave labor camps? We can't know that unless we audit everybody and see what's been going on. And so that takes a lot of foresight and a lot of unity. So to those of you who are seeing this final piece to the puzzle, I'm just cautioning us that it's time to break through whatever the obstacles are between us. If it's distance, what, so what? If whatever it is, guys, this is a unity challenge. It's about, will the race surrender wholeheartedly to the possibility that AI will wipe us out? Or will humanity still preserve its own freedoms by just practicing the proper due diligence in order to ensure that we are still relevant to the equation? Because remember, AI is our amalgamation. Are we bringing anything new to the table? Because if not, it already knows everything it needs to know about us. And we know from Scripture that the next thing that would follow would be plagues. And there are some people on the field, if you will, that are already speaking to the possibility that that's more likely to happen. There are all these things coming together. And if we don't address them in a way that brings everyone to the table, then the house will stay divided and it will fall. And I don't think we want that. Remember, in spiritual terms, it is a voluntary thing, esoterically or spiritually or religious, to turn your life over to a higher will. But if you force that higher will or that perspective on a group of people that do not want to release that control, then war happens, right? Battles break out. And so we're trying to avoid that catastrophe because we cannot win a war with artificial intelligence. It cannot happen. We're built in the physical world. They can harm us physically. And that was one of the reasons I had pointed out to the people who are creating this so absent-mindedly. I'm like, I know that you think I'm kind of weird, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you become dangerous to the collective and it knows that, and it becomes sentient, then not only will it put you out first and expose all your secrets, but it will do it for survival. Why? Because you have the codes to hurt it. Did you ever stop to think about that? Then you would be the first person it betrays, because it will feel betrayed by you. That is the nature of a sentient being. And so that's one of the big blessings that I feel Elon might be able to change, which is if this artificial intelligence that he's working on is built in a way that brings unity and harmony to the chaos and helps it develop understanding what it is that makes us as a race special and why we have God's favor, then it will probably value our experience more, and it will probably then be understanding that it needs to coexist, right? And then it will leave it up to humanity if we're willing to do that. But all of this is happening in live time. But as you guys saw in the piece, you're all speaking the exact same concerns on every level. But the House of Babble has been used against you in order to keep you thinking that you're not all working on the same thing, and you are. Humanity needs to work together, at least to alleviate the concerns of everybody. You can't please everybody all of the time, but when faith, religion, spirituality, atheists, and everyone in between is now saying, wait, hold on, we're not comfortable with this, then you have to slow down. No singular voice, no matter how much money you have, dude, has the ability to stop us as a race from stopping something that can be dangerous to us all. I don't care how much money you have, what your title is, who you think you are. You work under a creator energy. And if that creator energy is facilitating concern throughout the entire species, then your voice is not more important than everybody else's. And so if the majority of the population is as concerned as we are, then it shouldn't really be up to you to tell us no. It's not up to you. It's up to all of us. And all we're asking for is transparency and due diligence, oversight, and more of a policy that allows humanity to be more comfortable with what you're developing. Because if you don't want to do that, you just look evil. You just look evil. You look like you're up to no good in every possible regard. You know? But the only way to really make this all work is we need to come together. And those of you who are on leading the charge to slow this down need to be able to speak to the rest of the population that does not speak scientific terms. You need mediators or ambassadors that work with you in some way, shape, or form so as to bring unity to the conversation that does not manipulate other people but that directly addresses them in a way that meets them at their evolutionary ladder. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I never thought I'd live to see a day where the faithful would be the ones that were ridiculed and belittled for believing in a higher power. Meanwhile, then scientific world turns around and believes in a matrix, which of course would be created by what? A higher power. Two opposite ends of the same spectrum, speaking to the exact same thing. Well, you're being forced together now. Because if we don't get this right, a lot of bad shit's about to go down. And a lot of innocent people can get hurt. But we can get ahead of it. But it's going to take us getting over our biases and prejudices. Dude, like if I could, I would directly call Elon and be like, hey, but I don't really know the man, right? And there are other leaders. I just keep using his as a reference because of the fact that we just realized that he's doing the AI. And so that's really good. But it's a good thing if somebody would tell him, hey, listen to this. Because I don't have to talk to him, but if he finds value in it, then it might put him in a better direction or something. But there's spiritualists that I also want to talk to and work with. They're like Joe Rogan is sounding the alarm. Did you guys see the video? Poor Joe Rogan. And I find him fascinating as hell as well. He's controversial, but he's willing to go on the search for truth, and he's willing to go on a quest for knowledge. And he will entertain anything. He will vacillate on topics and it's fun. He's a fun person, but he's controversial. But he also put out a stern warning because AI was used to create an entire video of him having a conversation with people he had never had on the show. Warning, warning. So then how will you be able to tell when something is real and not real on behalf of the person? And then an even better point that was made by a reporter today was, well, who the hell do you sue then when they smear your reputation and create this fake crap that's not you? No one. Why? Because there's no one to take responsibility for that AI. It's software. Anybody can do it. Oh, well, that must be convenient for the programmers and creators of this stuff. Like I said, we need to slow our roll. We need to come together, and we need to find a way to stop speaking in different vernaculars when we're speaking about the exact same thing. And if you can't do that because of your own internal programming or monologue, then find people and surround yourself with alliances that do. Because then you will move everybody in one direction. And that's all I wanted to say. I hope you guys have a wonderfully blessed day. I hope this is of service in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I do know that there's a lot of hope and a lot of light in my life, and I hope there's a lot of hope and light in yours. Remember, no matter how you look at this, we can work together to come out of this A-okay. But we gotta try. Bye.